Number 1. Jenneiahn versus Derek Ephraim Condon. Bingham County, Idaho, March 13, 2024. The sun hadn't risen yet over the remote stretch of farmland along West 600 North in Bingham County, Idaho. It was mid-March 2024, and the temperature still dropped below freezing in the early morning hours. Most people in the area were asleep. But one man was wide awake, walking across open fields in total darkness, carrying a duffel bag filled with weapons, restraints, and a very specific plan. His name was Derek Ephraim Condon. He was 39 years old, a Blackfoot resident with no criminal convictions on record, but a history that people who knew him described as unstable. Investigators would later piece together that Condon had a connection to his target. Years earlier, he'd visited a pawn shop and gun range she operated. He knew who she was, he knew where she lived, and on this particular night, he knew she'd be alone. Or so he thought. Condon parked his white Honda CR-V about a mile away from the property, tucking it into a remote lava rock area where passing drivers wouldn't notice it. Then he walked. 1 mile on foot, across frozen fields, in total silence. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicking. This was deliberate. This was planned. And what he carried with him told investigators everything they needed to know about his intentions. Inside his bag, a 9mm pistol, a .22 caliber handgun with a suppressor attached, duct tape, 2 pairs of handcuffs, rope, a black ski mask, pause, and a screwdriver, which he'd used to break in. When he reached the house just after 2 a.m., he moved to the back door. He smashed the window with the screwdriver, reached through, and unlocked it from the inside. The glass shattered quietly. No alarms went off. No dogs barked. The house was silent. He stepped inside. At that exact moment, 85-year-old Jenneiahn was asleep in her bedroom, unaware that a man with a loaded gun was standing in her hallway. Pause. He had no idea that in the next few hours, she'd be forced to make a decision that would determine whether she lived or died. When Christine opened her eyes, Derek Condon was standing over her bed. A flashlight beam hit her face, a gun barrel pointed directly at her head. And before she could even process what was happening, he struck her, hard, in the head. Blood began pooling on her pillow. "Get up," he said. Christine did exactly what he told her to do. She moved slowly, trying not to provoke him, trying to stay calm. He grabbed her by the arm and forced her out of the bedroom, down the hallway, and into the living room. That's when he pulled out the handcuffs. He locked her wrists to a wooden chair. Now here's where this case takes a turn that investigators later described as one of the most critical moments in the entire sequence. Because while he was handcuffing an 85-year-old woman to a chair in her own living room, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Jenneiahn wasn't just any elderly homeowner. She was a former firearms instructor. She had trained competitive shooters. She knew how to handle a weapon under pressure. And she kept a loaded .357 Magnum revolver under her pillow. But right now, that gun was still in her bedroom, and she was handcuffed to a chair in the living room, bleeding from a head wound, with a man pressing a gun barrel against her skull and demanding to know where she kept her valuables. "I don't have much. There are 2 safes downstairs." Condon's eyes narrowed. He wanted to believe her, but he also didn't trust her. So he pressed the barrel harder against her head and said the words that would later be documented in the prosecutor's report. "You are going to die tonight." Then he went downstairs to search for the safes. Christine sat perfectly still. Her wrists were cuffed. Her head was bleeding, her heart was pounding, but her mind was working. And she began to think about that revolver under her pillow. So here's the situation. An 85-year-old woman, handcuffed to a chair, head injury, armed intruder in the basement, and the only weapon in the house is in a room she can't reach. What would you do? Because what Christine did next is the reason this case made national headlines. While Condon was handcuffing 85-year-old Christine Jenneiahn to a chair in her living room, he had no idea that she was a former firearms instructor. While Condon was downstairs tearing through rooms looking for safes, Christine started moving, slowly, inch by inch. She dragged the chair she was cuffed to across the carpet. The legs scraped softly. She paused every few seconds, listening for footsteps. And then she kept going. She dragged that chair all the way back to her bedroom. Once inside, still handcuffed, she reached under her pillow. Her fingers found the grip of the .357 Magnum. She pulled it out, awkwardly with both wrists restrained. Then she dragged the chair back to the living room and wedged the revolver between the armrest and cushion of the couch, hiding it from view. And she waited. When Condon came back upstairs, he was angry. He hadn't found what he wanted. He accused her of lying. He threatened her again. And then, investigators believe this is when he made his final decision. He told her she was going to die. Christine didn't wait for him to act. She reached for the revolver, and she fired twice. Both rounds hit Condon in the chest. His response was immediate. He raised his 9mm pistol and emptied the magazine. Bullets ripped through the living room. Christine was hit in the abdomen, in the leg, in the arm, in the chest. She collapsed onto the floor, still handcuffed to the chair, blood pouring from multiple gunshot wounds. Condon staggered backward into the kitchen. He took a few steps. Then he fell, and he died right there in the kitchen floor, surrounded by the tools he'd brought to restrain and kill an elderly woman. But Christine was still alive. Barely. She lay on the living room floor for 10 hours. 10 hours. She couldn't move. She couldn't reach a phone. Her disabled adult son was downstairs, unaware of what had just happened. Blood pooled around her. Shock set in. The pain was unbearable. And she waited. 10 hours. Bleeding out. Handcuffed to a chair. No phone. No help. And the man who tried to kill her is dead in the next room. How does someone survive that? Well, we'll get to that, but first, let me tell you what investigators found when they finally arrived. It wasn't until late morning, around noon, that Christine's son managed to bring her a phone. She dialed 911. Her voice was weak, but clear. "I'm handcuffed, and there's a dead man in my kitchen." Deputies from the Bingham County Sheriff's Office arrived at 12:17 p.m. They found exactly what she described. Derek Condon, deceased, lying in the kitchen. Christine, severely wounded, still handcuffed to the chair, lying in a pool of blood on the living room floor. Paramedics airlifted her to Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center. She underwent emergency surgery. Doctors later said she was lucky to be alive. The head injury alone could have been fatal. The gunshot wounds should have killed her, but somehow she held on. While Christine was in surgery, investigators began processing the scene. What they found painted a clear picture of premeditation. The broken rear window, the screwdriver on the floor, the handcuffs, the duct tape, the suppressed .22 caliber pistol, the 9mm with an empty magazine, spent shell casings everywhere, blood spatter analysis, bullet trajectory mapping. and a trail of footprints leading back across the fields to a white Honda CR-V parked a mile away. Inside that vehicle, deputies found cash, a money clip, extra ammunition, and more restraints. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This wasn't a random burglary. This was a targeted home invasion, and Derek Condon had come prepared to kill. Bingham County Prosecutor Ryan Jolly opened a formal review. He spent weeks examining the evidence, the 47-page deputy report, the forensic findings, the interviews with Christine, the autopsy results, the ballistic analysis. Pause. And when he was done, he issued a public statement. Christine Jenneyahn's use of deadly force was justified under Idaho law. Jolly went further. He said that if Condon had survived, he would have been charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, aggravated battery, burglary, and robbery. He called Christine's actions one of the most heroic acts of self-preservation he had ever reviewed in his career as a prosecutor. Now, you might be wondering, how did Condon know where Christine lived? Why did he target her specifically? And what was the connection between them that made him think she had valuables worth killing for? The answers to those questions reveal something even darker about this case. But before we get there, I need to tell you about the second case on this list, because it involves another intruder who made a fatal miscalculation. Only this time, the homeowner wasn't 85 years old. He was 27, and he had a very different weapon waiting for them. But we'll come back to Christine's case because there's one detail investigators uncovered that changes everything we just told you. And it explains why Derek Condon believed, wrongly, that breaking into her home would be easy. Before we continue, quick question. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country or state in the comments. I'm curious to see how far these stories travel. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because the next case is even more intense than this one.
Number 2. Joseph A. Ortega, Moreno Valley, Riverside County, California, June 29th to early July 2022. It was late June 2022 in Moreno Valley, California. The summer heat was brutal, over 100 degrees during the day, cooling only slightly at night. Most people in the quiet residential neighborhood near Alessandro Boulevard kept their windows closed, their air conditioners running, and their doors locked. But one man had been watching a particular house for days, waiting for the right moment to strike. His name was Joseph A. Ortega, and on the night of June 29th, he made his move. The home he targeted belonged to a family that had recently moved into the area. They had 3 young children. The father worked night shifts. The mother was home alone with the kids when Ortega forced his way inside through a back window just after midnight. He wasn't there to steal a TV or a laptop. He was there for something far more disturbing. When the homeowner's wife heard the sound of breaking glass, she didn't hesitate. She grabbed her cell phone, locked herself and her children in the master bedroom, and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line with her, telling her that deputies were on the way, urging her to stay quiet and keep the door locked. But Ortega didn't stop at the window. He moved through the house, room by room, searching. And when he reached the master bedroom door, he began trying to break it open. That's when the homeowner, a 27-year-old man who had just arrived home from his shift, entered through the front door. He heard his wife screaming. He heard his children crying, and he heard someone on the other side of the bedroom door trying to break in. He didn't call out a warning. He didn't announce himself. He retrieved the firearm he kept in the hallway closet, moved toward the bedroom door, and when Ortega turned toward him, he fired. Multiple shots, center mass. Ortega fell in the hallway. By the time Riverside County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the scene, he was already dead. Now here's where this case gets complicated, because Joseph Ortega wasn't just a random burglar. Investigators found something on his phone that changed the entire narrative. Something that made this case one of the most disturbing home invasions in Riverside County history. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk about what happened after the shooting. When deputies arrived at the scene, they found the homeowner standing outside with his hands raised. He told them everything: the broken window, the 911 call, his wife and kids locked in the bedroom, and the man lying dead in his hallway. The responding officers secured the scene, began processing evidence, and called in homicide detectives. The investigation moved quickly. Crime scene techs photographed the broken window, the forced entry points, the bullet casings, and the position of Ortega's body. They recovered his cell phone, his wallet, and a backpack he'd been carrying. And when they searched that backpack, they found items that made every investigator in that house stop cold. Duct tape, zip ties, a knife, and a bottle of sedatives. This wasn't a burglary. This was something else entirely. Detectives immediately began combing through Ortega's phone. What they found was a digital trail that led them to multiple properties in the area, homes he'd been surveilling, photos he'd taken of windows and doors, maps with addresses marked. The Moreno Valley home wasn't his first target. It was just the one where he finally got caught. Riverside County Sheriff's Office issued a public statement within 48 hours. They confirmed that Joseph Ortega, age 34, had been killed during an attempted home invasion. They confirmed that the homeowner had acted in self-defense, and they confirmed that based on the evidence recovered, Ortega had likely been planning far more than a simple burglary. The district attorney's office reviewed the case. They examined the 911 recording, the homeowner's statement, the physical evidence, and the items found in Ortega's possession. Their conclusion was clear: no charges would be filed. The shooting was justified under California's self-defense statutes. The homeowner had every reason to believe his family was in immediate danger, and he responded with force that the law considered reasonable under the circumstances. But here's the question that still haunts investigators. How many other homes had Joseph Ortega targeted before this one? And what would have happened if the homeowner hadn't arrived when he did? The answer to that question is still under investigation, because when detectives analyzed his phone, they found surveillance photos of at least 6 other properties in Riverside County. Some of them matched addresses where unsolved break-ins had occurred in the months prior, and in at least 2 of those cases, homeowners reported that items had been moved or disturbed, but nothing was stolen. Someone had been inside their homes, watching, waiting, planning, and now that person was dead. We'll come back to that, But first, I need to tell you about the third case, because it involves not one intruder, but two, and what happened when they broke into a home in Florida on the day after Christmas became one of the most intense self-defense cases of 2024.
Number 3. Jorge Nestevan Flores Toledo and Michelle Sotomayor, Manatee County, Florida, December 26th, 27th, 2024. Christmas had just ended. The decorations were still up. Families were winding down from holiday celebrations, finishing leftover meals, and preparing for the new year. It was the early morning hours of December 27th, 2024, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Manatee County, Florida. Most homes were dark. Most people were asleep. But two men were wide awake, and they were about to make the worst decision of their lives. Jorge Nestevan Flores Toledo, age 32, and Michelle Sotomayor, age 28, had been driving through the neighborhood for hours looking for targets. They weren't amateurs. Both men had prior arrest records. Both knew how to identify vulnerable properties. And when they spotted a house with no exterior lights, no visible security cameras, and an older model car in the driveway, they decided that was the one. They parked their vehicle 2 streets over and walked back on foot. No ski masks this time, no gloves, just 2 men in hoodies moving quickly through the darkness, confident that no one would see them coming. They were wrong. The home they targeted belonged to a retired U.S. Marine. He was 51 years old, a veteran who had served 2 tours overseas, and he lived alone in a modest single-story house near the edge of the county. He didn't have an expensive security system, he didn't have a Ring doorbell or motion sensor lights, but he did have something else, a loaded Glock 19 and the training to use it. At approximately 3:15 a.m., the homeowner was woken by the sound of his backsliding glass door being forced open. He didn't panic. He didn't freeze. He reached into his nightstand, grabbed the Glock, chambered around, and moved silently toward the hallway. By the time Flores Toledo and Sotomayor stepped inside, the homeowner was already positioned at the end of the hall, weapon raised, finger on the trigger, waiting. Now here's where things get intense, because what happened next was captured on a neighbor's security camera. And when Manatee County Sheriff's deputies reviewed that footage, they said it was one of the clearest examples of justified self-defense they'd ever seen. But the footage also raised a question that still divides people who've seen this case. Should the homeowner have fired, or should he have waited? Let me explain. When Flores Toledo and Sotomayor entered the home, they immediately began moving toward the bedrooms. They didn't know the layout. They didn't know if anyone was home. They were just searching room by room, looking for valuables. The first room they entered was a guest bedroom, empty. The second was a bathroom, also empty. But when they turned the corner into the hallway leading to the master bedroom, they saw him, a man, standing in the shadows, gun raised, aimed directly at them. For a split second, no one moved. Then Flores Toledo reached for something in his waistband. Investigators later confirmed it was a knife, but in that moment, in the darkness, the homeowner couldn't tell what it was. All he saw was a hand moving toward a weapon. And he reacted. 3 shots, rapid fire. All 3 hit Flores Toledo in the chest. He dropped instantly. Sotomayor turned and ran. He made it back through the living room, out the shattered sliding door, and into the backyard. The homeowner pursued him as far as the patio, then stopped and called 911. Manatee County Sheriff's deputies arrived within 4 minutes. They found Flores Toledo dead in the hallway. They found the homeowner sitting on his couch, hands shaking, still holding the Glock. And they found Sotomayor hiding in a neighbor's backyard 2 houses down, trying to scale a fence. He was arrested on the spot, charged with first-degree felony murder, burglary, and criminal trespass. Under Florida law, if someone dies during the commission of a felony, all participants in that felony can be held responsible, even if they didn't pull the trigger. Sotomayor's decision to break into that home with Flores Toledo made him legally responsible for his partner's death. But here's the part that makes this case so controversial. Because after Sotomayor was arrested, he told detectives something that changed the way people viewed this entire incident. He said that he and Flores Toledo weren't armed with guns. He said they were just there to steal. He said the homeowner could have scared them off without firing a shot. So the question is, did the homeowner have to fire, or did he have other options? We'll answer that, but first let me tell you what investigators found when they processed the scene, because what they discovered inside that house tells a very different story than the one Sotomayor tried to sell. Crime scene technicians spent 6 hours inside the home, documenting everything. The broken sliding door, the footprints tracked across the carpet, the knife found near Flores Toledo's body, and something else that made headlines when the sheriff's office released it to the press. A crowbar left outside the back door, covered in Sotomayor's fingerprints. That crowbar had been used to pry open the sliding door. It had also been used just days earlier to break into 2 other homes in the same neighborhood. Detectives matched the tool marks, the DNA, the fingerprints, and they realized that Flores Toledo and Sotomayor weren't first-time offenders. They were serial burglars, and the Marine's home was just their latest target. Manatee County Sheriff Rick Wells held a press conference 3 days after the shooting. He stood in front of a table displaying the evidence, the crowbar, the knife, the surveillance footage, and mugshots of both suspects, and he made a statement that went viral across law enforcement communities nationwide. This homeowner did everything right, Wells said. He didn't go looking for a fight. He didn't chase anyone into the street. He defended his home. He called 911, and he cooperated fully with investigators. This is exactly how self-defense is supposed to work. The state attorney's office reviewed the case and declined to file charges. The shooting was ruled justified. Sotomayor remained in custody, facing life in prison under Florida's felony murder statute, and the homeowner, who declined to be identified publicly, returned to his life, knowing that his training and his willingness to act had likely saved his life that night. If you're still watching, leave a comment and let me know, do you think the homeowner made the right call? Should he have fired, or should he have given them a chance to surrender? I want to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because the next case is going to test everything you think you know about self-defense.
Number 4. Kevin Michael Lighthall. Clare, Michigan, May 5th, 2022. It was early May in Clare, Michigan. The weather was warming up. Trees were blooming. People were opening their windows, letting in fresh air after a long winter. It was the kind of quiet, small-town environment where neighbors knew each other by name, where doors were left unlocked, and where crime was rare. But on the night of May 5th, 2022, that sense of security shattered. Kevin Michael Lighthall, a 37-year-old man with a history of drug-related arrests, had been driving through Clare for hours, high on methamphetamine, paranoid, and increasingly erratic. Friends who spoke to investigators later said he'd been acting strange for days, talking about people following him, accusing neighbors of spying on him, and making threats that no one took seriously. Until that night. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Lighthall's pickup truck pulled into the driveway of a home on North McEwen Street. The homeowner, a 52-year-old construction worker, was inside watching TV with his teenage daughter when they heard the sound of breaking glass. Someone had just smashed the front window. The homeowner stood up, walked to the entryway, and saw a man climbing through the broken window. Not sneaking, not hesitating, just forcing his way inside, glass crunching under his boots, blood dripping from a cut on his hand. "Get out of my house," the homeowner said. Lighthall didn't respond. He just kept coming. Now, here's what makes this case different from the others we've covered so far. Because Kevin Lighthall wasn't there to steal, he wasn't there to rob anyone. Investigators later determined that he genuinely believed, because of the drugs, because of the paranoia, that the people inside that house were trying to kill him. He thought he was defending himself. He was wrong, and that miscalculation cost him his life. The homeowner backed up toward the hallway, telling his daughter to run to her room and lock the door. She did, and as soon as she was out of sight, the homeowner reached for the 12-gauge shotgun he kept in the hallway closet. Lighthall kept advancing. He was shouting now, disjointed, incoherent threats, and moving toward the homeowner with his fists raised. The homeowner racked a shell into the chamber. The sound echoed through the house. But Lighthall didn't stop. "I said get out." Lighthall lunged. The homeowner fired. One shot, point-blank range. Lighthall fell backward into the entryway, collapsing onto the broken glass from the window he'd just smashed. He died within seconds. Clare Police Department officers arrived 6 minutes later. They found the homeowner standing outside, shotgun on the ground, hands raised. His daughter was still locked in her bedroom, crying, and Kevin Michael Lighthall was lying dead just inside the front door, surrounded by shattered glass and blood. The investigation was straightforward. Officers documented the forced entry, the broken window, the homeowner's injuries, a cut on his arm from being shoved into a doorframe, and the shotgun shell casing near the body. They interviewed the daughter, who confirmed everything her father had said, and they reviewed Lighthall's history. Multiple arrests for methamphetamine possession, multiple citations for disorderly conduct, and a restraining order filed by a family member just 3 weeks earlier, claiming Lighthall had threatened to burn everything down during a dispute. Clare County Prosecutor Michelle Ambrositis reviewed the case. She examined the physical evidence, the 911 call, the witness statements, and the toxicology report, which showed Lighthall had extremely high levels of methamphetamine in his system at the time of his death. Her conclusion was unequivocal. The homeowner acted in lawful self-defense. no charges would be filed. In a public statement, Ambrositis emphasized that Michigan's self-defense laws allow homeowners to use deadly force when faced with an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. Lighthall had forced his way into an occupied home, refused multiple commands to leave, and physically advanced on the homeowner despite being warned. The law was clear. The shooting was justified. But here's the question that haunted this case. Could it have been prevented? Because Kevin Lighthall's family told investigators that they'd been trying to get him help for months. They'd reported his drug use. They'd filed the restraining order. They'd called police multiple times when he showed up at their homes in the middle of the night, paranoid and aggressive. And every time, nothing happened. Until the night he broke into the wrong house and was shot dead in the entryway. So who's responsible? The homeowner who defended himself? Or the system that failed to intervene before Lighthall became a threat? We'll come back to that. But first, let me tell you about the fifth case, because it involves another intruder who wasn't there to steal. He was there for revenge. And what happened when he forced his way into a home in rural Virginia became one of the most clear-cut self-defense cases in the state's history.
Number 5. Samuel Craig Cheeks. Grayson County, Virginia, December 6, 2022. Winter had come early to Grayson County, Virginia in 2022. Snow covered the mountains. Temperatures dropped below freezing at night. And in the rural areas along the North Carolina border, homes were spread miles apart, connected by winding back roads where help could take 20 minutes to arrive, if it arrived at all. On the night of December 6th, a 48-year-old woman was home alone in a small farmhouse near the town of Independence when her phone rang. It was her ex-boyfriend, Samuel Craig Cheeks, and he was angry. The relationship had ended months earlier. She'd filed a protective order against him after he threatened her during an argument. The court had granted it. Cheeks was legally prohibited from contacting her, coming near her property, or attempting any form of communication. But that night, he didn't care about the order. He was calling to tell her he was coming over, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. She hung up, called 911, and told the dispatcher that her ex-boyfriend was on his way to her home, that he'd violated the protective order multiple times before, and that she was afraid he was going to hurt her. The dispatcher said deputies were on the way, but the closest unit was 18 minutes out. But Samuel Cheeks arrived in 7. Now, here's what makes this case so disturbing. Because Samuel Cheeks didn't just show up at her door and knock. He didn't yell from the driveway or try to talk his way inside. He came prepared to force his way in. And what happened next was captured on the homeowner security camera, footage that would later be played in court and shown to a jury as evidence of what prosecutors called a clear and imminent threat of deadly violence. Let me tell you what that footage showed. At 9:52 p.m., headlights appeared in the driveway, a pickup truck. Samuel Cheeks got out, leaving the engine running, and walked directly to the front door. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the doorknob and twisted it. Locked. So he moved to the side window and tried to force it open, also locked. Then he went back to his truck and he pulled out a crowbar. The homeowner was watching all of this through her window. She had her phone in one hand, the 911 dispatcher still on the line, and in the other hand, she had a .38 revolver her father had given her years earlier. She'd never fired it outside of a shooting range. But she knew that if Cheeks got inside, she'd have to use it. Cheeks returned to the front door and jammed the crowbar into the frame. The wood splintered, the door buckled, and then, with one final shove, it burst open. He stepped inside. The homeowner was standing in the hallway, 10 feet away, the revolver raised and pointed directly at him. "Get out," she said. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. Cheeks didn't stop. He took another step forward. "I said, get out." He raised the crowbar. She fired 3 times. All 3 rounds hit Cheeks in the chest and abdomen. He staggered backward, dropped the crowbar, and collapsed onto the front porch. By the time deputies arrived, he was dead. Now, here's where this case becomes a lesson in how self-defense laws are supposed to work. Because everything the homeowner did that night was textbook. She called 911 before Cheeks arrived. She told the dispatcher she was afraid. She stayed inside. She gave him multiple warnings, and she only fired when he refused to leave and advanced on her with a weapon. The Grayson County Sheriff's Office reviewed the security footage, the 911 recording, the protective order, and Cheeks' criminal history, which included prior domestic violence arrests and violations of restraining orders. Their conclusion was immediate and unanimous. Justified self-defense. No charges filed. But here's the part that makes this case so important, because in the weeks after the shooting, Cheeks' family hired an attorney and attempted to file a war-death lawsuit against the homeowner. They argued that she had overreacted and that Cheeks was only there to talk. The lawsuit was dismissed within 30 days. The judge reviewed the evidence, the forced entry, the crowbar, the protective order violations, the 911 call, and ruled that the homeowner had acted lawfully and that no reasonable person could conclude otherwise. The attorney later withdrew from the case entirely. Virginia State Police issued a public statement supporting the dismissal, emphasizing that homeowners have the right to defend themselves when confronted with violent intruders, and that protective orders exist precisely because the threat is real and documented. The Grayson County Sheriff went further. In a press conference, he displayed the crowbar Cheeks had used, the splintered door frame, and still images from the security footage showing Cheeks advancing with the weapon raised. He said, "This woman did everything right. She called 911. She warned him. She gave him every opportunity to leave, and when he chose violence, she defended herself. That's not a crime, that's survival." So let me ask you something. If someone violates a protective order, forces their way into your home with a crowbar, and refuses to leave when you have a gun pointed at them, how much more warning should you give? That question became the center of a national debate after this case went public, and the answer, according to Virginia law, is simple: none. Once an intruder forces entry and advances with a weapon, the homeowner has no duty to retreat, no obligation to wait, and no requirement to de-escalate. The law is on their side. But not everyone agrees with that. And the next case we're covering is going to show you exactly why.
Number 6. Denham Springs Intruder, Unnamed Suspect. Livingston Parish, Louisiana, February 2022. Denham Springs, Louisiana is a working-class suburb just east of Baton Rouge. Quiet streets, family neighborhoods. The The kind of place where people leave their porch lights on and check in on their elderly neighbors. It's not the kind of town where you expect violent home invasions. But in February 2022, that changed. It was a Tuesday night, just after 11 p.m., when a 34-year-old single mother was putting her 2 young children to bed. Her husband was deployed overseas with the military. She was alone in the house. The doors were locked. The alarm system was set. Everything seemed normal. Until she heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the back of the house. Someone was trying to get inside. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, and moved quickly to her children's rooms. She woke them up, told them to be quiet, and locked all 3 of them inside the master bedroom. Then she opened the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out the 9mm Glock her husband had left with her before he deployed. The 911 dispatcher stayed on the line. The woman could hear footsteps now, moving through the kitchen, the living room, getting closer to the bedrooms. And then she heard something that made her blood run cold. The doorknob to the master bedroom started to turn. Now, I want you to imagine this for a second. You're alone in a locked room with your 2 kids. Your husband is halfway around the world. There's an intruder on the other side of the door trying to get in, and the police are still 5 minutes away. What do you do? Because what this mother did next became one of the most widely shared self-defense stories in Louisiana history, and it all came down to a single decision she made in the 3 seconds before that door opened. The intruder, whose identity was later withheld by Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office to protect the family's privacy, forced the bedroom door open using a screwdriver he'd brought with him. He stepped inside, and the first thing he saw was a woman standing in the corner of the room, her children behind her, a gun raised and pointed directly at his chest. "Get out of my house," she said. Her voice didn't waver. The intruder froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he took a step forward. She fired. Once. The round hit him in the shoulder, spinning him backward. He stumbled, turned, and ran. She didn't chase him. She stayed in the bedroom, weapon trained on the doorway, until she heard the sound of him crashing through the back door he'd broken to get inside. Then she heard him collapse in the backyard. Livingston Parish Sheriff deputies arrived 4 minutes later. They found the intruder lying in the grass, bleeding heavily from the gunshot wound, barely conscious. Paramedics transported him to a local hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. He survived, and when he woke up, he was placed under arrest. The investigation revealed that the suspect had been stalking the neighborhood for weeks. Ring doorbell footage from multiple homes showed him walking through yards late at night, testing doors and windows, looking for easy targets. He'd successfully burglarized 2 other homes in the area before attempting to break into the military family's residence. This wasn't random. He was methodical, calculating, dangerous. Livingston Parish Sheriff Jason Ard held a press conference 2 days after the shooting. He displayed the screwdriver used to force entry, the broken glass from the back door, and surveillance images showing the suspect casing the neighborhood. And then he said something that got picked up by news outlets across the country. This mother is a hero. She protected her children. She gave the suspect a chance to leave, and when he chose to advance on her and her kids, she defended her family. That's exactly what the Second Amendment is for, and we fully support her. The Livingston Parish District Attorney's Office reviewed the case and declined to file any charges against the homeowner. The intruder, however, was charged with aggravated burglary, attempted assault, criminal trespass, and stalking. He later pled guilty and received a 15-year sentence without the possibility of parole. But here's what makes this case so significant. Because after the story went public, the mother received dozens of messages from other military spouses, wives and husbands whose partners were deployed, thanking her for speaking out about home defense. Many of them admitted they'd never thought about what they would do if someone broke in while they were alone with their kids. This case became a rallying point for military families, and it raised a question that gun rights advocates and self-defense instructors still debate today. Should every military spouse be trained and armed before their partner deploys? We'll come back to that, but first, let me tell you about case number 7. because it involves a homeowner in North Carolina who didn't have time to call 911, didn't have time to warn the intruder, and didn't have time to think. He had 3 seconds to decide whether to shoot, and what he chose became one of the fastest self-defense cases ever documented by law enforcement. Number 7. Wake Forest Intruder, unnamed suspect. Wake Forest, North Carolina, October 2023. Wake Forest, North Carolina sits just north of Raleigh. It's a college town, home to Wake Forest University, but it's also a residential community where families have lived for generations. Tree-lined streets, historic homes, low crime rates. The kind of place where people jog at night without a second thought. But in October 2023, a series of home invasions shattered that sense of security. Over the course of 3 weeks, at least 7 homes in the Wake Forest area were broken into, all during daylight hours, all while the homeowners were away. The intruder was methodical. He avoided houses with security cameras, targeted homes with privacy fences, and was in and out within minutes. Police had no leads, no witnesses, no surveillance footage, until the afternoon of October 19th, when he made a critical mistake. He broke into a house while someone was home. The homeowner was a 41-year-old software engineer who worked from home 3 days a week. On that particular Thursday, he was upstairs in his home office on a video conference call when he heard the sound of his back door being forced open. He muted his microphone, stood up, and moved quietly to the top of the staircase. From there, he could see directly into the kitchen, and what he saw made his heart stop. A man in dark clothing, gloves, and a baseball cap was standing inside his house, rifling through drawers, pulling out electronics, and shoving them into a backpack. The homeowner didn't call 911. He didn't have time. Because the moment he shifted his weight, the floorboard beneath him creaked and the intruder's head snapped up. Now, here's where this case becomes a lesson in split-second decision-making, because what happened next took less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds from the moment the intruder saw the homeowner to the moment shots were fired. And in those 3 seconds, both men made choices that would define the rest of their lives. Let me walk you through what happened, frame by frame. Second 1. The intruder sees the homeowner at the top of the stairs. His hand moves to his waistband. Second 2. The homeowner sees the hand movement. He doesn't know if there's a gun. He doesn't know if the intruder is armed, but he knows he has a firearm in the drawer of the hallway table 3 feet away from where he's standing. Second 3. The homeowner lunges for the drawer, pulls out his Sig Sauer P320 and raises it just as the intruder pulls a knife from his waistband and starts running toward the stairs. And then, in the fraction of a second between breaths, the homeowner fires. 1 shot. The round hits the intruder in the upper chest, just below the collarbone. He drops the knife, stumbles backward into the kitchen island, and collapses onto the tile floor. The homeowner stayed at the top of the stairs, weapon trained on the intruder, and used his cell phone to call 911. The entire 911 call, from the moment he dialed to the moment officers arrived, lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. And during that entire call, the intruder never moved. He was conscious, he was breathing, but he didn't try to get up, he didn't try to run. He just lay there, bleeding, staring at the ceiling. Wake Forest Police Department officers arrived, secured the scene, and called for EMS. The intruder was transported to Wake Med Hospital, where he underwent surgery. He survived, and when he was released from the hospital 2 weeks later, he was immediately arrested and charged with 7 counts of felony breaking and entering, larceny, possession of burglary tools, and assault with a deadly weapon. Investigators matched evidence from his backpack, stolen electronics, jewelry, and personal items to 6 of the 7 unsolved burglaries in the area. DNA evidence from cigarette butts found at multiple crime scenes confirmed he was responsible for them all. The Wake Forest case was the only one where he'd been caught because it was the only one where a homeowner was present. The Wake County District Attorney's Office reviewed the shooting and issued a statement within 48 hours. The homeowner acted in lawful self-defense. No charges would be filed. The intruder had forced entry into a occupied dwelling, was armed with a knife, and advanced on the homeowner when confronted. Under North Carolina's Castle Doctrine, the homeowner had no duty to retreat and was legally justified in using deadly force. But here's the question that investigators are still asking. Why did the intruder run toward the homeowner instead of running away? He had a clear path to the back door. He could have dropped the backpack and fled. Instead, he pulled the knife and charged up the stairs. Why? The answer, according to forensic psychologists who reviewed the case, is something called fight or flight adrenaline response. When cornered, some people freeze, some people flee, and some people, especially those under the influence of drugs or with prior violent criminal histories, fight. The intruder in this case had methamphetamine in his system and a history of assault arrests. When he saw the homeowner, his brain didn't choose flight, it chose fight. And that choice cost him a bullet in the chest and a 20-year prison sentence. We'll come back to that psychological response in a moment, but first let me tell you about case number 8, because it involves a homeowner in Georgia who faced not one intruder, but 2. And what happened when they forced their way inside became one of the most legally complex self-defense cases in recent Georgia history.
Number 8. DeKalb County Intruder. Unnamed suspect. Decatur, DeKalb County, Georgia, March 2023. Decatur, Georgia is an inner suburb of Atlanta, diverse, densely populated, and bordered by some of the city's highest crime neighborhoods. Home invasions aren't uncommon in DeKalb County, but what happened on the night of March 14, 2023, stood out for one reason. The homeowner was a 68-year-old retired school teacher who had never fired a gun in self-defense before that night. Her name has been withheld by authorities to protect her identity. But what we know from police reports is this. She lived alone in a modest single-story home near the Decatur city limits. She had no security system, no Ring doorbell, no exterior cameras, just deadbolts on the doors and a .38 special revolver her late husband had purchased decades earlier. On the night of March 14, 2023, just after midnight, 2 men approached her home. One of them, later identified as a 29-year-old with multiple prior burglary convictions, forced the front door open using a pry bar. The other man, younger, stayed on the porch as a lookout. The homeowner was asleep in her bedroom when the crash of the door splintering woke her. She sat up, disoriented, and reached for her phone. But before she could dial 911, she heard footsteps moving down the hallway toward her room. Heavy footsteps, fast. She opened the drawer of her nightstand, pulled out the revolver, and pointed it at the doorway just as the first intruder stepped inside. "Get out," she said. Her voice was shaking. The intruder looked at her, looked at the gun, and kept walking toward her. She fired. The round hit him in the abdomen. He doubled over, stumbled backward, and collapsed in the hallway. The second intruder, hearing the gunshot, ran from the porch and disappeared into the night. Now, here's where this case becomes complicated, because the intruder who was shot didn't die immediately. He lay in the hallway, bleeding, conscious, and according to the 911 call the homeowner made immediately after the shooting, begging her not to call the police. "Please," he said, "don't call them. I'll leave. Just let me go." The homeowner refused. She stayed in her bedroom, gun still in hand, and told the 911 dispatcher everything that was happening. And she stayed on that call until officers arrived 7 minutes later. But here's the question that became the center of the legal review. Should she have rendered aid? Once the intruder was wounded and no longer a threat, did she have a legal or moral obligation to help him? Let me tell you what the law says, and then let me tell you what actually happened. Under Georgia law, a homeowner who uses deadly force in self-defense has no legal obligation to provide medical assistance to the person they shot, as long as that person entered the home unlawfully and posed an imminent threat. The duty to preserve life applies to innocent parties, not to armed intruders who forced their way into a dwelling. So, legally, the homeowner did nothing wrong by staying in her room and waiting for police. But morally, that's where the debate begins. The intruder bled out in the hallway while the homeowner remained on the phone with 911. Paramedics arrived, but by then he'd already lost too much blood. He died in the ambulance en route to Grady Memorial Hospital. The medical examiner later determined that the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the abdomen, resulting in massive internal bleeding. But the examiner also noted that if pressure had been applied to the wound within the first few minutes, the intruder might have survived. So, should the homeowner have helped him? Should she have left her room, approached a man who'd just broken into her house, and tried to stop the bleeding? DeKalb County District Attorney Sherry Boston reviewed the case and issued a clear statement. Absolutely not. This woman had no duty, legal or otherwise, to endanger herself by approaching an intruder who had violently forced entry into her home. She defended herself, called 911, and waited for police. That is exactly what we advise citizens to do in these situations. The case was closed with no charges filed. The second intruder, who fled the scene, was arrested 2 weeks later after being identified through surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera. He was charged with felony murder under Georgia's Party to a Crime statute, which holds accomplices responsible for deaths that occur during the commission of a felony. He later pleaded guilty and received a 25-year sentence. But here's what haunts this case. Because after the intruder's family learned about his death, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the homeowner, claiming she had a duty to rescue once he was no longer a threat. The lawsuit alleged that her refusal to provide aid was callous and contributed to his death. The lawsuit was dismissed, but the question it raised: do homeowners have any obligation to help the people who break into their homes, remains one of the most debated issues in self-defense law. We'll come back to that, but first, let me tell you about case number 9, because it involves a homeowner in Ohio who didn't shoot an intruder. He captured him, restrained him, and held him at gunpoint until police arrived. And what happened next became a textbook example of how to handle a home invasion without pulling the trigger. Number 9. Jeffrey Carl, Warren County, Franklin, Ohio, 2022. Franklin, Ohio is a small town in Warren County, about halfway between Cincinnati and Dayton. Population, just under 12,000. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where high school football games draw the whole town, and where crime is rare enough that when something happens, it makes front-page news. In the summer of 2022, something happened. Jeffrey Carl was a 34-year-old drifter with a long criminal history: theft, trespassing, drug possession, probation violations. He'd been in and out of county jails for years, bouncing between towns, staying in motels or camping in wooded areas when he had nowhere else to go. And on a hot July afternoon, he decided to break into a house on East 2nd Street. The home belonged to a 52-year-old military veteran and his wife. They were out running errands when Carl forced his way inside through a basement window. He spent about 20 minutes inside, moving through rooms, opening drawers, looking for cash or anything he could sell quickly. He found a laptop, some old jewelry, and about $200 in cash from a desk drawer. Then he heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. The homeowners were back. Carl panicked. He dropped the laptop, shoved the cash and jewelry into his pockets, and ran toward the back door. But before he could get it open, the homeowner walked into the kitchen and saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Carl bolted. He ran toward the hallway, trying to reach the front door. The homeowner, a former Marine who'd served in Iraq, reacted instantly. He grabbed Carl by the back of his shirt, slammed him face first into the wall, and took him to the ground. Within seconds, Carl was pinned, face down on the living room floor, with the homeowner's knee pressed into his back. "Don't move," the homeowner said. "My wife is calling the police right now." Carl didn't move. He didn't resist. He just lay there, breathing hard, realizing he'd picked the wrong house. Now here's what makes this case so important. Because the homeowner in this situation had every legal right to shoot Jeffrey Carl. Under Ohio's Castle Doctrine, a homeowner can use deadly force against an intruder who has unlawfully entered the dwelling. The homeowner had a firearm in the house. He could have retrieved it. He could have fired. But he didn't. Instead, he used his military training to restrain Carl, control the situation, and wait for police. And that decision, not to shoot when legally he could have, became a case study in how force should only be used when absolutely necessary. Let me explain why. The homeowner's wife called 911. She stayed on the line, describing the situation, confirming that the intruder was restrained and not resisting. Warren County Sheriff's deputies arrived within 6 minutes. They found Carl still pinned to the floor, the homeowner kneeling over him, completely in control. Deputies handcuffed Carl, searched him, and recovered the stolen cash and jewelry from his pockets. They documented the forced entry through the basement window, photographed the scene, and interviewed both homeowners. And then they arrested Carl on charges of burglary, theft, and criminal trespass. The Warren County Prosecutor's Office praised the homeowner's actions, calling them restrained and appropriate. In a public statement, the prosecutor noted that while Ohio law would have justified the use of deadly force, the homeowner's decision to physically subdue the intruder without firing a shot demonstrated exceptional judgment and discipline. But here's the part that matters. Because after the case went public, the homeowner gave an interview to a local news station. And what he said became one of the most quoted statements in self-defense discussions. "I didn't want to shoot him. I wanted to stop him. There's a difference. If he'd had a weapon, if he'd fought back, if I thought my wife was in danger, then yeah, I would have done what I needed to do. But he didn't, so I didn't. And I'm okay with that decision." That statement, "I didn't want to shoot him, I wanted to stop him," became a rallying cry for advocates of de-escalation and proportional force. It highlighted the fact that even in states with strong castle doctrine protections, homeowners still have the option to use less than lethal force when the situation allows it to. The law gives you the right to shoot, but it doesn't require you to use it. Jeffrey Carl pled guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. The homeowner and his wife moved to a different neighborhood a few months later, citing the stress of the incident and the unwanted media attention. But the case itself remains a model for how homeowners can defend their property without resorting to deadly force, if they have the training, the confidence, and the situational control to do so. But here's the question this case raises. Should homeowners be expected to use restraint when confronting an intruder? Or does the law's permission to use deadly force mean you should use it every time without hesitation? That debate continues, and the next case, our final case, is going to show you exactly why it's so complicated. Because it involves a homeowner in Mississippi who shot an intruder who wasn't armed, wasn't violent, and according to witnesses, was trying to leave when the shots were fired. And what happened next became one of the most controversial self-defense cases in recent Southern legal history.
Number 10. Lorenzo Bluitt, Gulfport, Harrison County, Mississippi, 2024. Gulfport, Mississippi sits on the Gulf Coast, about an hour east of New Orleans. It's a beach town, casinos, seafood restaurants, vacation rentals, but it's also a working-class community where poverty and crime rates are higher than the state average. Home invasions are a recurring problem, especially in neighborhoods near the port where transient workers and seasonal employees cycle through. In early 2024, a string of burglaries hit the area near Pass Road. Over the course of 6 weeks, at least a dozen homes were broken into, all during the day, all while homeowners were at work. The intruder or intruders were never.
Number 10. Lorenzo Bluitt, Gulfport, Harrison County, Mississippi, 2024. Gulfport, Mississippi sits on the Gulf Coast, about an hour east of New Orleans. It's a beach town, casinos, seafood restaurants, vacation rentals, but it's also a working-class community where poverty and crime rates are higher than the state average. Home invasions are a recurring problem, especially in neighborhoods near the port where transient workers and seasonal employees cycle through. In early 2024, the string of burglaries hit the area near Pass Road. Over the course of 6 weeks, at least a dozen homes were broken into, all during the day, all while homeowners were at work. The intruder or intruders were never caught, until one afternoon in late March, when a homeowner came back early from his shift and found someone inside his house. That someone was Lorenzo Bluitt.
a 32-year-old local man with prior arrests for trespassing and drug possession. He wasn't armed, he wasn't violent, and according to what investigators later pieced together, he wasn't even the one who'd been responsible for the previous burglaries. The homeowner, a 38-year-old construction worker, came home around 3 p.m. and immediately noticed that his back door was open. He walked inside quietly, moving through the kitchen, and that's when he saw Bluitt standing in the living room holding a pillowcase filled with electronics. "What are you doing in my house?" the homeowner shouted. Bluitt dropped the pillowcase and bolted. He ran toward the back door, trying to get out the same way he came in. The homeowner chased him through the kitchen, out onto the back porch, and into the yard. Now, here's where this case becomes controversial. Because what happened next, depending on who you ask, was either a justified act of self-defense or a shooting that never should have happened. The difference comes down to one question: was Lorenzo Bluitt still a threat when the homeowner fired? Let me show you both sides, and then let me tell you what the evidence actually says. According to the homeowner's statement to Gulfport police, Lorenzo Bluitt turned around in the backyard, reached into his waistband, and made a motion that looked like he was pulling out a weapon. The homeowner, who had retrieved a handgun from inside the house during the chase, believed Bluitt was armed, so he fired 3 times. All 3 rounds hit Bluitt in the back and side. He collapsed in the yard and died within minutes. But according to witnesses, neighbors who saw the incident from their windows, Bluitt never reached for anything. They said he was running away, hands empty when the shots were fired. They said he never turned around. They said he never posed a threat. And they said the homeowner shot him in the back while he was fleeing. So which version is true? Gulfport police investigated. They processed the scene, recovered the firearm, documented the bullet trajectories, and interviewed everyone involved. What they found was complicated. The autopsy confirmed that Bluitt was shot in the back. The trajectory analysis confirmed he was moving away from the homeowner when the rounds were fired. And a search of his body revealed no weapon, no gun, no knife, nothing. But toxicology results showed that Bluitt had methamphetamine and fentanyl in his system at the time of his death, and medical examiners noted that he had an underlying heart condition that may have been aggravated by the drugs, the physical exertion, and the stress of being chased. That detail became critical to the legal analysis. The Harrison County District Attorney's Office reviewed the case and made a decision that divided the community. No charges would be filed against the homeowner. The DA's statement cited Mississippi's Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground laws, which allowed deadly force when a person reasonably believes they are in imminent danger. The statement also noted that the homeowner's perception that Bluitt was reaching for a weapon was reasonable given the circumstances, even if that perception turned out to be wrong. But it also included a caveat. The DA acknowledged that the shooting occurred outside the home, that Bluitt was fleeing, and that these factors complicated the application of self-defense statutes. However, the DA concluded that the totality of the circumstances, the burglary, the chase, the motion toward the waistband, created enough reasonable doubt about the homeowner's intent to make a criminal prosecution unlikely to succeed. In other words, the DA believed the homeowner might have made a mistake, but it wasn't a criminal mistake. So let me ask you, was this self-defense? Or was this a man who chased down an unarmed burglar and shot him in the back because he was angry?
That question became the center of protests that erupted in Gulfport after the DA's decision was announced. Bluitt's family held vigils demanding that the homeowner be charged. Civil rights groups joined them, arguing that Mississippi's Stand Your Ground laws were being used to justify killings that had nothing to do with self-defense. But supporters of the homeowner pointed to the burglary, the trespassing, and the fact that Bluitt had drugs in his system and a history of criminal behavior. The case was eventually reviewed by a grand jury, which declined to indict the homeowner. And with that, the criminal case closed. But the debate didn't, because the Lorenzo Bluitt shooting became a symbol of everything controversial about Stand Your Ground laws, the way they can protect homeowners who act in good faith, and the way they can shield homeowners who might have gone too far. Before we wrap up, I want to hear from you. Out of all 10 cases we covered today, which one do you think was the most justified, and which one do you think crossed the line? Leave a comment and let me know. And if you made it this far, you're definitely the kind of viewer this channel needs, so hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we've got more cases like this coming every week. So, we've covered 10 cases, 10 home invasions, 10 split-second decisions, and 10 very different outcomes. Some of these homeowners were cleared immediately. Some were charged and convicted. Some sparked national debates that are still ongoing today. But here's the thread that connects them all. The law expects you to use force only when you're in imminent danger. Once that danger ends, once the intruder is down, once they're fleeing, once they're no longer a threat, the law expects you to stop. And if you don't, what started as self-defense can become murder. Let's revisit the cases quickly. Jenneiahn in Idaho shot an intruder who had handcuffed her, beaten her, and threatened to kill her. She fired when he was still armed and actively threatening her life. Justified, no charges. Ortega in California broke into a home where a mother and her children were hiding. The father arrived, confronted him, and fired when Ortega refused to leave and advanced toward the bedroom. Justified, no charges. Jorge Flores Toledo and Michelle Sotomela in Florida broke into a Marine's home armed and masked. The homeowner fired when they entered the house and one of them reached for a weapon. Justified, no charges. The surviving accomplice was charged with felony murder. Kevin Lighthall in Michigan forced his way into a home high on methamphetamine, refused to leave, and lunged at the homeowner. The homeowner fired once. Justified, no charges. Samuel Cheeks in Virginia violated a protective order, forced his way into his ex-girlfriend's home with a crowbar, and advanced on her after being warned. She fired 3 times. Justified, no charges.
The Denham Springs intruder in Louisiana broke into a military spouse's home while her husband was deployed. She locked herself and her kids in a bedroom, warned the intruder, and fired when he forced the door open. Justified, no charges. The Wake Forest intruder in North Carolina was caught mid-burglary, pulled a knife, and charged at the homeowner. The homeowner fired once. Justified, no charges. The DeKalb County intruder in Georgia broke into an elderly woman's home, refused to leave when confronted, and advanced on her. She fired once, and he later died from the wound. Justified, no charges. The legal debate centered on whether she should have rendered aid. She wasn't required to. Jeffrey Carl in Ohio broke into a home and was physically restrained by the homeowner, a military veteran who chose not to shoot despite having the legal right to do so. Carl was arrested and convicted. The homeowner was praised for his restraint. Lorenzo Bluitt in Mississippi broke into a home, was chased into the backyard, and was shot by the homeowner, who claimed Bluitt reached for a weapon. Witnesses said Bluitt was fleeing and unarmed. No charges were filed, but the case remains controversial. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. If someone breaks into your home tonight, what would you do? Would you shoot? Would you wait? Would you call 911 and hope they arrive in time? Because the law says you have the right to defend yourself, but it also says you have to be reasonable. And the line between those two things, between lawful self-defense and criminal homicide, can be razor thin. If you enjoy the true crime documentary, want more this kind of the news to be shared with you, kindly subscribe and share. Thank you for watching. See you the next time.